Today in the conversation, I do have a special treat for you. I have my old friend, Miranda Armstadt, as my guest once more. Remember her? She's the author of a very impressive romantic suspense titled Cut Back to Life, a book that I had the privilege to read from cover to cover. I enjoyed it. But tonight we're going to be talking about something different. She's making a switch from romantic suspense into historical novels. She's deep into it. And the project, so we're going to be talking about this interesting project. But before we get into this interesting video, I just want to remind everyone it's important as the holiday season is in full gear right now. Don't forget Bittersweet Memories of Last Spring, my immigrant fiction novel. So it's what a moment to give a friend the gift of love, the gift of reading. So when you're making your list like Santa and check it twice or multiple times, don't forget to include Bittersweet in it. That's important to me, and that's important to you. By doing so, you're supporting my literary journey. So Bittersweet Memories of Last Spring, it can be found anywhere they sell books, including Walmart. You can get it there too. Also, I'm asking everyone to continue to lend support behind the conversation, one of your best literary shows out there on social media. So if you have already subscribed to this channel, you can always encourage friends to do the same. And if you haven't and you want to subscribe now, don't forget to click the notification bell so that way every time a video is posted, I'll go to you as soon as possible. So let's get started. Again, my name is Ardain Isma, and I'm here this evening with an impeccable author, a good friend. I'm here with writer Miranda Armstadt.
Bonjour.
Comment vas-tu?
Très bien. Et tu?
Ça va très, très bien.
Awesome.
If you remember last time, we had a conversation about her very impressive romantic suspense novel, of which I had the privilege to savor from cover to cover. We had a blast last time.
We did.
But tonight we're going to be talking about something different. Miranda is working on a very important historical novel, and we're going to be talking about it. But before we get into this extremely important novel, Miranda, welcome back again into the conversation.
Thank you for having me back. We had a lot of fun last time. I know we will again.
Okay. All right. So just like I said, we had Cut Back to Life, a wonderful novel to read. But we have two different genres, from romantic suspense into historical fiction. So what really made you decide to make such a big switch from to this particular genre in literature?
So it really was just the story itself both times. And it was just that was the genre for the first one was romantic suspense. That's just where the story landed. This is a story that is based on my own family. I'm using a lot of personal family letters, dossiers, photographs, history, court documents going back even a century. And it just happens to coincide with a lot of really interesting global history. The primary part of it is going to fall within World War II and the early years of the Cold War, but it actually goes all the way back to the 1920s and all the way into the early 2000s. So, I didn't just take a little bite of cake. I was like, let's just eat the whole damn cake.
Quite an extensive research that you're undertaking. But let me ask you something. How is it different to write in this genre versus romantic suspense that all your readers, had enjoyed so much?
It's really different. I had to do a lot of research for the romantic suspense one as well, but the level of research you have to do for historical fiction is astronomical. First of all, you're dealing with eras that the kind of person who's going to read this knows a lot. They're coming into it with a lot of background, and you can't fake it. You have to get
Like that.
no, you can't fake it. You have to get every detail right. And I mean, it is down to what kind of ammo, were they using in this particular battle? Maybe these partisans were using different weapons than, the other, than the Chetniks were different than the partisans. It's so particular and so specific, and you just have to research and research and research and research. It's crazy.
Now, they say that writers who embark upon writing historical fiction are the ones who have reached a certain level of intellectualism. Do you find that?
I mean, I think I'm a very curious person. I don't really think of myself as an intellectual. I think I'm reasonably intelligent, but I think honestly, my curiosity is insatiable. And when I start following a thread, I have to follow it and follow it and follow it and follow it. I can't stop until I have every detail. So, I'm sure there are very intellectual people who write historical fiction. I think mine is more just that I get so wrapped up in every detail and wanting it to be authentic and wanting to capture you're not just capturing different ways of life, you're capturing an entirely different era and different eras, and you're writing about people as they go through different eras, which is also really interesting. To write about someone when they're 18 versus when they're 60 is a really interesting exercise as a writer.
How does that interfere with what we call as historical, as fiction writers, something we really put greater emphasis, which is character development? How do you see that in writing historical fiction?
It's so, I mean, to me, it's the most interesting part about writing it. Now, remember, with this particular story, I am somewhat basing it on my own family. So obviously I knew a lot of these people. Now that doesn't mean that I didn't know my grandfather when he was 20, right? I didn't know my dad when he was 20. So, but I have photos, I have a lot of information, and I know their basic personalities. So that's really helpful in incorporating it in. At the same time, you don't want to get stuck on reality. You're writing a story and it has to be interesting. So you have to kind of mesh what you know with what makes the best story. And I do think character development is fascinating in historical fiction.
Okay. Now, but why do you think there's so much scrutiny when it comes to historical fiction? And I just want to go back to the same question I asked earlier. They put greater emphasis on a writer's intellect, on on the breadth and depth of a research to justify a historical fiction. So, Miranda, whether you like it or not, I believe, writing historical fiction, it to me, it's one of the most sophisticated way to express beauty and intellect.
Well, thank you. I mean, I appreciate what you're saying, and I don't, disagree. I think, again, it goes back to the readers, the kind of readers you're going to draw in who are interested in this. For my particular one, my family is Jewish, so we're going to have Jewish readers. There's obviously a lot of military stuff, so we're going to have people who know a lot of military history, which is very, very specific and global. We're going to have American history people. We're going to have European history people. So, typically the kind of readers you're going to get for this know their fields really well. And if they see something that doesn't work, it's going to bother them. I'm telling you, it's going to bother them. So, it's like when a doctor sees a movie where they go, oh, that would never happen in the OR, right? Like you
Yes.
want it to be you want it to be authentic, and you don't want anything to pull someone out of the reverie you get into when you read. We all sort of fall into that, right? Like dream state. And you don't want anything that jars you out of it where you go, wait a minute, that's not how it was. So you want to keep them in that dream state a little bit.
At the end of this journey, you expect to gain a lot of new readers because readers usually who read historical fiction are not necessarily the ones who would fall for a romance story, for example. Although I have to say, every historical fiction always has a love story in the backdrop, to pull the plot forward, to move it forward.
Both of those are definitely true with my story.
Okay.
There definitely is more than one love story actually in it. And needless to say, because we're dealing with intelligence and espionage, there's a lot of deceit and, things go, I don't want to give away the plot, but nothing is going to go smoothly, as Mr. Shakespeare said, to paraphrase him very badly. What do you say? The course of true love never did run smooth, right? And yeah, as far as the readers go, it was interesting when I did the romantic suspense that people like you, who I wouldn't normally have thought would be interested in reading it, really liked it. I found that men really liked that, the cut back to life, which was really a surprise to me. So I'm hoping I will be equally surprised with, some segments of readers that I don't expect for this. That being said,
Okay.
I do think it's a little easier to predict your demographic with something like this. I'm just because of what I've seen, I'm 3 years into it. I see what my Twitter followers are excited about. I know they're excited when I say, I'm bringing family documents in, National Archive, Freedom of Information Act, CIA documents, State Department documents, military documents. I mean, it's really, really a lot of research that has been interwoven. And then, as I saw one expert who writes historical fiction said, he said, I have a notebook this thick for like about a paragraph in my book. And I was like, yeah, I can relate to that. That's it. You have to do so much research, and then you have to let a lot of it go. It's just sort of hovering in the background, almost like music, but that nobody really recognizes what it is, but it's sort of setting the stage. Because what you don't want to do is write a textbook. Nobody's interested in that.
Okay, man, let me ask you something. We know that there's another name for historical fiction, which is creative nonfiction.
I love that.
Because, in literature departments throughout our university world, I have to say there is an unspoken bias towards historical fiction against other genres in literature. Can you please explain to our audience why is so? Why?
I mean, I just think it's the complexity of it. Like I said, I think I wrote the romantic suspense one in 4 months, which I can't really believe looking back. This one, I'm coming into my 4th year. I'm hoping by the end of this year, it will be ready to publish, just ready to, not publish, but ready to publish. It's like starting with this piece of marble, like Michelangelo, and you've got your hammer and you chip and you chip. And as you chip, you go, no, that's not right. Okay, no, I got to do this over here. It's just the complexity of it, I think, is next level.
Right. Okay, so Miranda, I know that it's been a little over 3 years in this project. I have a very specific question for you. What are some of the challenges in researching historical fiction in general? What are some of the roadblocks also have you encountered so far into this journey?
I mean, some of it, especially with espionage and intelligence, obviously you are never going to get the whole story. Even when you put in for freedom of information, you're going to get things that are redacted, that are blacklined, and you don't know what they're never going to send you. They're not going to say, we're not sending you this. They're just going to not send it to you. So, you're dealing with that roadblock. Then you are trying to create a fascinating plot, but the plot has to intersect with real events in history. And I'll tell you what a huge challenge was. When you're looking at World War II in particular, things, especially in the last 2 years, things changed week to week, month to month. So if you're putting dates in there, it's like if it's Sunday, it can't be the same as on Wednesday. That's how quickly things change sometimes. And, when you're dealing with politicians coming at each other and scandals and all of these things, and obviously when certain people died, all of these things have to be coordinated into your plot accurately and still keep the plot really interesting. And that is a huge challenge.
Undertaking. Yeah. With such a, important project, my question is, do you ever get what we call battle fatigue as a writer?
That's such a good question. Yes, I do, Ardain.
How do you fight that?
I find it's funny. I think I actually had some today. I find what you have to do when you are hitting one of those things where you're like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know where I am. I'm lost in the weeds. You have to kind of do something completely different, like go to a different part of the story, work on a different part of the story, because you can get deer in headlights. You can get, what the hell am I doing? You can get in over my head. You can get all of those feelings. And I just think you have to accept it as part of what happens when you do something this massive. You can't come at yourself about it. You just have to be like, I'm just having one of those days. It'll pass. Meanwhile, let me go work on, part 3 instead of part 2. There's like always something else you can dive into to kind of refresh yourself a little bit.
You know what? Last time we talked, I remember it was the first time you raised the prospect of writing a historical fiction story, but also you say you would put a heavier weight behind the story because of the fact that you were going to try to go the traditional way. Has there been any change in this strategic thinking when it comes to publishing your work, Miranda?
I am still on the fence about whether I'm going to go traditional or not. As I said, I'm about a year off. I do have some marketing support I'm going to start working with in January, and I won't get too much into that, but I am going to, discuss with them the pros and cons of either way. The challenge with this is, and the reason I'm starting to work with a marketing support team is, even if let's say I had the best case scenario or down where I got an agent in 2 weeks and then they got me a deal in 2 weeks, which would be ridiculously lucky. But let's say that happened. They're still not going to put a lot of marketing muscle behind an unknown author. So no matter what you do, you have to look out for your own marketing. So I'm kind of getting ahead of the game on that. And that way I feel like whichever way I decide to go when I get there, I'm going to have that already in motion. You don't want to wait until you're ready to publish to do that.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. And so, so we say that there is a chance that you still might go the independent way, I would say.
I might. Really, the reason being that when you take 4 years to get something, ready to go, do you really want to wait another, year, 2 years to get an agent, another year, 2 years for a publishing deal? You don't know. There's so many unknowns. There's so many things that are outside of your control. And that's, I don't think anyone who knows me will be surprised to hear I'm a control freak. So, you don't have control of your cover. You don't have control of, the way it's formatted, all of those things that I am really a perfectionist on.
When it comes to that.
Yeah. So we'll see. I'm not saying either way, but if you ask me to say right this second, I'd say I'm probably going to go independent, probably, but who knows?
Okay. Now I know that marketing is a huge, huge part of making sure and the drive to make sure that to ensure the success of a book, and that requires time, money, and you name it. So if you tell me that a traditional publisher will pick up the book, will sign you, you know, on a story, and then agrees to publish it and not putting the weight necessary to make sure that it becomes a success out there. So what's the use for an unknown author to wait maybe probably 4 or 5 years to get that done, and then you're still going to be cheated on? I mean, I call it
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, I agree. I think what the deal is now, as opposed to say 10 or 15 years ago, the amount of content that is out there because of the explosion in independent publishing, there's so much volume that they're kind of going on economies of scale now,
right,
unless you're a Stephen King or,
right.
a J.K. Rowling or somebody at that level. They're just, if they make a little money here and a little money there, that's fine. They're not really expecting anybody to be gangbusters, or they don't know who's going to go gangbusters. And so I just think the market is so different than it was even a decade ago.
I don't know if you heard of this now. There's a new trend out there called a hybrid publishing. It's just like a co-project, a joint project between an author and a publishing.
Oh,
And a
yeah,
pub-
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Is that something that you would consider someday?
From what I've heard, and I am not an expert on it, but from what I've heard, it sort of has the disadvantages of both without having the advantages of either. So, just from, again, I'm not an expert in this, but I'm going to say probably not, just from what I've heard about it.
Okay. Okay. Because I think that, when you have a baby like this, after so many months, of hard work, and then you finally conceive a baby, you certainly do not want to give it away.
Right. Right.
So I agree with you, well, from a writer's perspective myself. So let's go back to something very important, because research is something I love to do. As a matter of fact, I teach research methods at the university level. I love that. But I know there's an aspect of research that most people don't know. Now you're a historical fiction writer, you understand exactly where I'm coming from. Is there's the joy and the surprises also. Because when you're researching something, there's always an element of surprise. Oh, and you know what? I never expected this. So what happens? So what do you do when moments like this, when you have to face moments like this and this
I'm going to
particular.
give you a really interesting example of exactly that. So, very few people have seen any of my copy, but my brother, who is certainly very historically knowledgeable, has read some of the galleys that are ready. And there was one thing, I won't give it away, but there was one thing that he said. He said that would never have happened at that time. And I said, well, guess what? It did. And but see, that's what's so interesting, is that is exactly what you're saying. It's the surprise of, you go, wait, that happened then? Really? Wow. And when you do the research on it, it makes sense. So then you have to build that into the story, because your readers are going to be thinking the same way. They're going to be like, wait a minute, she made that up. That couldn't have happened then. So you have to have your characters discussing it in a way to, make it make sense to the reader. But I did think it was really funny that my brother, who's, very smart, Harvard, Columbia, very, very bright, said that would never have happened at that time. And I was like, there you go. Truth is stranger than fiction.
You know what? Most writers usually have a working title. Now, doesn't mean this is going to be the published title. Can you give us at least a little sneak preview on what the working title is?
I
I'm
do,
not
I
asking
do,
you to give
I
it
do have,
away.
I do have a working title. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but I will
Okay.
tell you this. I
Okay.
think I think titles are really important. I really do. And
Mhm.
they're so multifaceted, and you have
Mhm.
to think about what is it telling your reader? How is it drawing them in? Is it giving the right, concept of what your story is about? Not just the genre, not even just the era, but the aspect of the era. So, I like my working title, but I'm going to say we're engaged, but we're not married. So we might break up before.
Okay. Okay. So putting all that aside, the question of finishing it, polishing it, try to get a publisher or go independent. So when do we expect? At least give us at least a window of time.
Well, if I am going to stay on track, which I'm really holding my feet to the fire now, because at some point you have to be like, you know what, you just
You have
got
to
to
call it.
get this done, right? Um, so based on that, I'm hoping by early 2024. So, basically a year, maybe a year and a few months that it will actually be for sale out there. And
Great.
and trust me, that's ambitious.
I know, because I know
It's
you are such
ambitious,
a
but yeah.
perfectionist,
But I mean, I
Nothing
just
flies when it comes to Miranda. Okay. Now, my last question. If there's a lesson you would want to give to anyone any writer out there who would love to embark upon a journey to write a historical fiction story, any advice you might want to give that person?
well, here's the first thing. Obviously, a lot of it depends on the era you're dealing with, because if you're talking about, the 14th century, the kind of material that is available to you is obviously very different than if you're
Mhm.
talking about, right, the
Right.
20th century or now the 21st century. So I think you have to kind of go into it knowing there's a lot that you don't know, even though you think you know a lot. I thought I knew a lot about World War II when I started this, and I learned so many things that I had no idea.
Okay.
So I think you should always approach, whatever you're researching, you need to tell yourself that you don't know what you don't know yet, and you're going to find out more of what you don't know. You have to kind of just stay very humble about it, because you're going to find out that you're really not that bright.
Very good. So with that, I'm just going to say it's been more than a pleasure. And I hope when the book is published, you're back here again in the conversation.
You know it. You know we will. And then you'll know, the actual title.
Okay.